Right when my printer starts. Sorry about that. So yeah, my name is Dave Woodward, and I'm going to be doing the presentation today about the fractional reasoning screeners. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen in just a second. Little bit of background here. First, we have Tamara Mack online with us here today. She's going to be monitoring the chat as well as the Q&A. So either way, you can put your questions in chat or Q&A. We'll catch them either way. We might answer some of them in the moment as they come up. Other questions we'll go ahead and answer at the end. I'll go through this. It's hopefully a lot of information, but I'm going to go through as quickly as possible to get everybody as deeply informed about this project as is possible. So I will go ahead and share my screen now. Tamara, if you could just confirm that we are seeing the slides.
Yep, confirmation here.
All right. They're loading. There we go. So fractional reasoning assessment. This is basically version 2 of the assessment that we are going to be talking about today. The first version came out in October. This is a fully open source assessment project. We will be posting the assessments through the Forefront website, which is where we host these open source assessment projects. So they will be freely available in perpetuity to everyone everywhere. We're talking today about the 2024 field testing and refinement. So there was an October version that came out, basically an early beta version of an assessment that came out, trying to get a little bit of the ideas wrapped around and to get some ideas about how we can assess for fractional reasoning. And then also there's going to be another version, and the release date is going to be has been set for next Monday. So we just need a few more time to dot our I's and cross our T's before we put that one out next Monday. But we will release that on Monday to everyone who signs up for it. And my name is Dave Woodward, and I am leading this quest, if you will. So for today's meeting, there's going to give just a little bit of history, kind of lay the case for the thing, provide you with an overview of the project as well as the field test, and ask for your involvement in the field test. I'll give you a little bit of background about the goals and the theory of improvement for this assessment. I'm going to talk about the assessment system itself as I envision it developing right now and the components of the assessment. And then talk a little bit about fractional reasoning and what the heck is it. And then also this final plea once again to you to get involved, and so that we can build a community that will then help this to be successful in the end. So the plan, here's the big scope of the plan, is that by the end of this, there will be a series of what I'm calling useful assessments for fractional reasoning for grades 3 through 6. The scope could shift a little bit over time, but the idea right now is that by July of 2024, we'll have a series of grade level assessments. And I'm thinking right now of one version, but I could imagine that there might be 2 versions of each of those. Grade level assessments for grades 3 through 5. So end of 3rd grade, end of 4th grade, end of 5th grade, but could be given in the fall of 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade as a kind of formative assessment. And then also underneath that is a diagnostic assessment that would be adaptive and work for all grades. Adaptive, like as teacher adaptive. This is not an online assessment. It's a given paper and pencil and in interview form. So yeah, to be released July of 2024 is the goal of this thing. And then it's an open source, once again, hosted by Forefront Education. So to give you just a little bit of idea what the scope of this thing is in terms of the field test, today we're launching this field test and hopefully wrapping up and collecting all the information by June 15th. Then the assessment draft 2 would be released on Monday of this coming Monday. So that's when that draft will actually go out. There will be surveys and opportunities to provide feedback. All the participation is voluntary for this. We'll set up a series of surveys, kind of part of them, the intention will be to validate the assessments themselves. Do they align well with the construct as it is defined? And then also this question of, are the questions clear in the administration? Are they well designed? What could we tweak? What could we change? Whatever needs to be necessary to get the assessment as high quality as we can over the next 6 months. 3 to 4 focus groups is what I'm planning for right now. I am imagining that we'll have one for each kind of grade level screener assessment, and then one for the diagnostic assessment itself. So just a kind of a series of ways to get back the feedback from those focus groups. And then there will be, throughout the field test, we are hoping to collect some data from the actual assessment itself. That will be done through Forefront. I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. And then the idea is that we will go through kind of a rapid iteration process. We get feedback, something needs to be tweaked, we'll release a new one. So I don't know how many times we will release new things. No way to predict that, but the idea is to just as quickly as possible refine and calibrate, if you will, the assessment well, so that it's meeting the needs of you, the users. And then finally, once again, the target final release date of July of 2024. Okay. Moving right along. So fractions are an issue. And so I'm going to kind of talk about the why here for just a second. So I've got a series of slides here. Now, this is data that is coming from the Universal Screeners for Number Sense. There's if you're familiar with those, fantastic. If you're not, Google them, Universal Screeners for Number Sense. They have fraction assessments on them in grades 3, 4, and 5. There are tasks aligned with fractions and fraction knowledge. And from our results in that, you can see that currently, fewer than 50% of students are successful in fractions at 4th and 5th grade, slightly more at 3rd grade with the tasks of the Universal Screeners for Number Sense. And I pulled out 2 of those tasks from the fall of the assessments, fall of 4th grade, fall of 5th grade. We have this one. This is a number line race problem for 4th grade. And what we're looking at here, I should have clarified that. The green are those students here at the top who are performing proficiently. That is, they have successfully completed the task. Those who have partial success are in the yellow, and then those who are not successful, the larger group down here, are those who are unable to complete this task or get either of the questions correct. The question on this one in 4th grade, this is the start of 4th grade, so aligned with 3rd grade standards, we've put it into the context of a race course and said this race course is 2 miles long. We want to put in a water table after 1/3 of a mile. Where should we put that? And mark that on the line. And then the other one is, where should we put another one at 2/3? And then to check the responses there. So currently, about 30% of students are able to answer that correctly at the beginning of 4th grade. At 5th grade, a very similar question about a number line question here. We're asking them to put these 3 numbers onto the number line. And there we get slightly better results. It looks like about 35% of our students are performing proficiently, but still another 35% are completely unable to put these numbers onto a number line. So there's an urgency here related to this. When we look at this through the lens of the Common Core State Standards, we get a very similar picture. So these would be data that we are collecting in Forefront via instructional programs that we support, like Bridges in Mathematics or Illustrative Mathematics and other instructional programs. So these are directly aligned with Common Core State Standards for grades 3, 4, and 5. So the assessments that are coming from our instructional programs are giving us a very, very similar picture. About 45% of students across all grades are proficient, are able to demonstrate proficiency with fractions through these grades, whereas the majority of students are unable to demonstrate proficiency. And here you can see at 5th grade, I've got it kind of hovered over here so you can see that there's 45.7% are showing themselves as predictive or as proficient with fractions as demonstrated through their instructional programs. So a real need to support students in this. We are not satisfied with these results, of course. A little bit more about the why to do this. And just that made the case there that the majority of students are not meeting standards for expectations in grades 3 through 5 with fractions. Fractions are important, and competency is predictive. Sigler et al. Sorry, I didn't put the date in there. I believe we're talking about 2011, if I'm not correct. Have really demonstrated that fractions in particular are an area of mathematics that is highly predictive of success in middle school and in high school. And really, I mean, honestly, improvement in instruction is equitable, just, right, and it is possible. So just to say, we should be doing this because it's the right thing to do for our students. And so that's a really a big reason why I'm putting the time into this. And also, I'm just going to put it out there that it is a professionally challenging and fascinating problem of practice. I get a lot of joy working with teachers and working with students in understanding fractions and in thinking about fractions myself. And so therefore, I just think it's a good thing to engage with, because we're going to build a little community here talking about fractions. We're going to talk about this over time and really think about what it is that we can do to move the needle in terms of helping more students to really get a deep understanding of fractions. So the primary goal of this whole thing is better understanding of fractions and the learning of fractions and how kids learn fractions, I should have said there, for students, for teachers, and for everyone who supports them. That's why we're doing this, is for everyone to learn fractions better. Okay, so there's a theory of improvement behind this. I just feel like it's necessary to sort of like, once again, kind of like, what is it we're trying to accomplish with this? So the primary learner in this idea and the way that this is going to improve outcomes for our students is that educators will learn. That's the most important thing in this thing for this all to work. By educators learning, we're going to get improved instruction. That's our theory here on this. In terms of educator learning, we're talking about what is fractional reasoning, differentiated from just kind of knowledge of fractions, if you will, or ability to add fractions or whatever, like specific thing. What is this idea of fractional reasoning? How do we recognize fractional reasoning amongst our students? And also, how do we implement practices that support that reasoning? So if educators learn about fractional reasoning and deepen their understanding of how students demonstrate fractional reasoning, then we're going to get improved instruction at tier 1 in terms of improved lesson planning and implementation. So whether that means differentiated instruction, whether that means tweaking the lessons that are coming through your instructional programs, or just better planning, better resources that you're accessing, whatever that might be for your whole class. And also at tier 2, that we will improve targeted instruction for select students when necessary. So that's the idea, is that we get better educator learning, leads to improved instruction, which then in turn leads to an impact on students in terms of their ability to make sense of fractions. And when students are able to make sense of fractions, it will increase engagement and perseverance in problem solving. So the idea is that they will learn also problem solving skills, and therefore they will learn to apply in their lives this idea of fractions. And then lastly, this idea of generalizable idea, deep learning of fractions, in contrast to just the memorization of rules, really deep transferable knowledges. And so therefore we would get better transfer and application to new learning and long-term success in mathematics. So this is all the hopes of this tiny little project here, is that we are going to have major impacts on students, that is going to be lasting impact over time, and on the teachers that serve them as well. Of course, primarily on the teachers that serve them. Moving right along.
I did just want to stop you here. We've gotten the question a few times. Yes, this recording will be shared within a day of today's presentation. So just look out in your email for that recording link. Going back to what you were sharing, the 2 examples of the number line, we did have a question specifically about how the Universal Screeners for Number Sense is assessing for fractions for the 2 number lines. The question specifically is, I wonder why the fourth grade question uses a 0 to 2 number line, but the expectation from 3rd is a number line 0 to 1. Would you like to speak to that?
So actually the expectation is not from 0 to 1 in 3rd grade. According to, it might be for your state standards. When you read the Common Core, they talk about this idea that fractions can go on beyond 1. And so that's at least my read of it within that. And most of the state standards that I work with, they also kind of imply that what we're getting at 3rd grade is this idea of denominators taking wholes, any number of wholes, and continuing that, so that you can go on beyond 3/4 to 4/4 to 5/4 to 6/4 to 7/4, and that this is a continuation of counting of fourths. And so we could take a look at that a little bit later, but I think that aligns pretty well with the intention, at least, what most state standards have written in the goals. All right, so moving right along, there's this question that comes up oftentimes: are they formative assessments? And I like to say that no assessment as a piece of paper is a formative assessment. That formative assessments only become formative when the educator uses the information in specific ways. So yes, they are formative assessments if the information is useful for informing instructional practices. And if in fact that information is used, then they are formative assessments. So definitely they are intended to be formative assessments in that way. There's another question: is, are these assessments used for grading? And sometimes people like to make a very specific line that if you're going to be pure about your formative assessment, that you should tell the students that these will not be used for grading in any way whatsoever. I have currently included that in the script, but I think teachers are going to have to make their own decisions about those things as well. But knowing that we're doing it in that way, I think helps the students to make it more formative. And then the last question in terms of a formative assessment: is the assessment used to provide feedback to students? I'm going to say I'd like to encourage that. That this is an assessment where I think it would be really interesting to gather the results, analyze results, make some instructional adjustments, if you will, but then maybe revisit some of these tasks or very similar tasks with your students to talk about, why do you think someone did this? Why do you think somebody did this? What's the kind of feedback that you can do to give to the students directly to help them to understand what it is that is the goals of the thing? And then also this question of, are the results discussed and utilized in low stakes ways to measure improvement? I'm going to put it out there in the materials that the intention of this assessment is not for teacher evaluation. These should not be used for determining special education status. That's not the intention that I am putting onto the assessments right now in terms of the way that they are designed. But know that could be different things. But I'm thinking in terms of a low stakes way to measure improvement. Your MTSS, in particular Tier 1, how do we support students better? PLCs, professional learning communities, that is, data-driven instruction communities, coaching, professional learning, these kinds of ideas. So trying to get the ideas out there and so that they become part of a collaborative community to think about how we as a community support the learning of our students better. How do we support fractional reasoning in our classrooms? So we did put out, thanks to all of you who provided feedback on the October version that went out. And we did put that out, got some feedback back. The general agreement was that the ideas were lined well with this big idea of fractional reasoning. However, that the assessment was not as efficient as it could be, and that simpler would be better, and that we need to clarify the instructions. So hopefully all of that will happen in the edition that we're going to be putting out. In particular, this work on efficiency I took very seriously, because having given it myself, I'm just like, we got to make this easier. We got to make it better. So the idea then, therefore, for the fractional reasoning assessments that will be coming out next week are that there will be a screening readiness assessments, one of each for grades 3, 4, and 5. The idea is that these will primarily be intended for uses in grades 3 through 6. So for instance, if I am a 4th grade teacher and we have an upcoming unit on fractions, I might want to give the 3rd grade screener that's going to assess the ideas of 3rd grade, that's to determine the readiness of the students, and then to provide proactive instruction in advance of the 4th grade learning that's expected, right? So they could be used kind of as a summative assessment if you want to kind of figure out, okay, what have they learned, what other instruction needs to take place, or as a preparatory assessment for the upcoming instruction. So that's the idea. So 1-page assessments. These are, well, 2-sided, 1 page, and I'll show you just a little bit of the one that's intended for fall of 4th grade or end of 3rd grade. Hopefully about 30 minutes, whole class administration, one shot. I am going to provide a pretty detailed script about so that we have a little bit of standardized administration. I've found over the years that there's a lot of that it's almost better just to have a little bit of standardized administration to help things move along quickly, so that things don't become burdensome, if you will. That's the really primary reason for that. And then also, in addition to the screener, that there will be a diagnostic assessment, a single form of this thing that would be able to use across different grade levels. And this is basically the October version of the fractional reasoning assessment that went out with some modifications. So there will be some things that are going to shift on there just a little bit, clarification on things, a couple of tasks got tweaked. But once again, all of these things are going to get tweaked throughout the spring as well.
I do have this is a good stopping place to share a question from Melinda Sayers in the group. I'm assuming that she's familiar with the universal screeners for number sense, which are kindergarten through 6th grade assessments, and there are 3 per grade level aligned to beginning of year, middle of year, and end of year standards or expectations. So she is asking, will this fractional reasoning assessment also have alignment to beginning of year and middle of the year expectations?
No, that's not my intention right now. My intention right now is just to think, because we're going deep just with fractions. So the universal screeners for number sense assess a variety of skills across place value, fractions, number sequences, etc. And this, because it's very specific to fractions, the idea is that it will be aligned with just kind of the content of 3rd grade related to fractions, content of 4th grade related to fractions, because oftentimes those are only taught in a unit or 2 anyways, so it makes sense to just kind of concentrate them. And then the teachers would then need to know what time of year they're doing that instruction, so that would highly impact that idea. Okay, so moving right along, framework. I just want to talk a little bit about where the ideas are coming from. In terms of the influences and the design of the ideas. And this is kind of an ongoing building list, honestly, but I'd like to make it clear. So definitely looking at state standard systems as the framework, and the reason why, I mean, rather than using a theoretical framework, a learning trajectories framework, there are a number of different learning trajectories that have been articulated in the research, and I'm going to be referring to those in just a second. However, because they don't align with the curricular programs, they don't align with what we know teachers are teaching in the classrooms, they become a little bit unwieldy in terms of trying to understand how to serve students better. So the primary framework that I'm going to lay on here first, especially for the screeners, is the state standards systems, so that we can have a really easy, manageable, very useful assessment system. I looked very detailed at Anderson Norton's work from 2018, and that will be in the thing. But they've set out a very useful framework for understanding the trajectories of learning fractions. So that one's the next one. And building on that, then this book, Developing Fraction Knowledge by Hackenberg, Norton, and Wright, was also definitely an influence on some of the ideas in here. Fosnot and Dolk's work of constructing fractions, decimals, and percents with young mathematicians at work was another book that definitely looked at the ideas from. The work of the U.S. Math Recovery Council, if you have not done their fractions training, I highly recommend it. It's fantastic. It will make you think about fractions in ways that you would never imagined that you would, and fantastic work as well. Obviously, the work of cognitively guided instruction is so important, and then lastly, Michael Batista's work with cognition-based assessment and teaching. So lots of different ideas building up to the big idea of how do we assess fractional reasoning, and then this comes to this big question of what is fractional reasoning? What do we mean by fractional reasoning? So I'm going to go ahead and read this one aloud because I think it's a little dense. But I am going to a working definition, if you will, for writing these assessments. This could be tweaked as well, but the ability to apply quantitative understandings of fractions to solve problems and communicate and justify thinking verbally, symbolically, through gestures, using visual models and measurement tools. So this is about applying those understandings, communicating the understandings, and justifying the thinking. So there's a lot in there. This is not, so fractional reasoning does not stop at getting correct answers. Certainly getting correct answers is important. However, it does not necessarily communicate reasoning. In fact, I was having a conversation with someone here at Forefront Education just the other day. She was observing a classroom. The task was to multiply, no, it was a division of fraction problems. And she said that the child, to solve that problem, was counting on her fingers. Now that can work if you're skip counting or whatever, and you're following a procedure, you can work that. But that probably is not a good strong indicator of fractional reasoning to solve that problem. So what I like to say is that fractional reasoning does not exclude the use of procedures. So certainly there are people who have a very high abilities to reason and understand fractions that will use procedures, but simply the rote application of procedures without the ability to explain the logic of those procedures does not constitute fractional reasoning. So we have to figure out in this assessment, how are we assessing the thinking behind the answers, right? Which is going to be difficult for the full class assessment in particular. The diagnostic interview, it becomes a little bit easier because you're able to sit there with the student and question the student as we're going through the assessment, but trying to get a full class assessment on this is going to be a little tricky. So the way that I have then designed these assessments and this idea of assessing fractional reasoning is thinking that there are different facets of fractional reasoning. So I start this with the idea of words and symbols. In order to be able to communicate your reasoning and in order to understand the reasoning of others, you need to be able to understand first, right? And so we need words for this. We need to be able to read and write fractions. So just understanding the symbols of the things is one small piece of fractional reasoning. The next piece that I go to is reasoning with shapes. So it'd be a question like, this is 1. This rectangle here represents 1. Show 1/5 of this, right? So we can evaluate students' understanding through their use of shapes. The next one the facet of this is number lines. So we have a number line here with only one number on it, 1/4, and we ask, where does 1 go? And hopefully, if you want to put in the question that's missing there, that is, that's a difficult question to ask if you really think about it. So next one is then sets. So fractional reasoning with sets. Circle 1/3 of this set is an example of this kind of idea. And then show why I've put on the magnitude, comparison, and equivalence question here, because we know that students will have procedures for comparing fractions that are not necessarily generalizable. And so therefore we need to make sure that we do get at the why and their reasoning behind the comparison. But magnitude, comparison, and equivalence are very, very important pieces of fractional reasoning. And then the last one, computation. So using reasoning to solve these kinds of problems, right? So 2 minus 1/4, how do you reason through that problem that's kind of got that operation to it, right? The computational aspects of fractional reasoning. So through these 6 facets, we're going to look at fractional reasoning. So why a lens? First of all, it's because there's no one facet of fractional reasoning that really is going to get you to the full, I understand fractions, right? You have to be able to apply that learning across a variety of contexts, but also, and this is an image here from Forefront, just an idea for a spreadsheet that you could create yourself if you really wanted to. Also, imagine that you have the names of the students there on the left. And then you can sort these students out and say, okay, so I've got, for instance, in this case, I could see I've got pretty strong fractional reasoning with sets. And yet at the same time, when it comes to magnitude, comparison, equivalence, I've got a number of students who are still just approaching with this. Maybe they're just applying kind of a rote procedure, but they don't really understand it. Who knows what it might be? But this would give you an idea of, okay, I need to slow down, I need to spend a little bit more time on magnitude and comparison. Might even be able to use that understanding of sets to be able to increase their understanding in that area. So Forefront will be set up to collect the data across the 6 facets of this and visualize those for your whole class and for your whole school for that matter and on beyond, but also then for individual students. So here I have an individual student. And here, when I'm thinking about how do I serve this student, I can see, well, they're doing well with words and symbols, they're doing well with the shapes, but when it comes down to computation, they are not applying their reasoning to solve the computational problems. How do I support them in doing so? So that's kind of that question there. I've given a little click over here onto the right, just so you know, this is the number lines there, and that would be where the entire body of evidence. So if the assessments or a series of assessments were given a number of times, then all of that would be collected over there. And we'd be able to see that kind of progression of the learning across time relative to fractional reasoning. Just a little bit more about the data collection, because it's sort of like, well, why collect data in the first place? And I'm going to go through this quickly, but I think it's important. So the data collection will be of the assessment results, right? There will be surveys that collect data as well, like I said earlier, and the feedback and all that. That's outside of Forefront. But data collection of the assessment results will happen only in Forefront. So this is only going to be open to Forefront clients to submit that data. I don't want to deal with any data privacy issues or anything related to that in this field test. And so because we know that we already have contracts with our Forefront clients, we will use Forefront for our data collection and be able to do the analysis in a safe way in through that platform. But I think in general, when you're thinking about data collection of assessment results, and this might be true of all assessments, but certainly for this assessment here, we want it to be practical for the teachers. It needs to be helpful for informing their feedback to the students. It needs to be helpful for planning and instruction, and it needs to be helpful for communicating with families. So that's why we're collecting the data for the teachers in particular. In terms of MTSS, we want to make sure that we're accurately identifying students who are in need of support, right? Tier 2 in particular, not special education, but tier 2 supports, and then focusing attention on areas of improvement in curricular implementation. It could be, I wouldn't be surprised at all, quite frankly, is if you're coming through this and you're finding that you give this screening assessment to a group of 5th graders, let's say, and find that one facet of the understanding, let's say sets or something like this, is completely devoid. And it could be that because your instructional program never leans that way, never teaches that way. There are a lot of curricular programs that I have seen that focus almost entirely on circles when they are teaching fractions, or as was come up in the comment before, right, that the number lines only go to 1. And so therefore students are not really able to demonstrate their understanding of fractions as numbers that can fall anywhere on the number line. So knowing that these are things that relate tightly to the instruction, right? Because we truly believe that instruction works, right? We need to make sure that we're analyzing our programs and seeing if there are ways that we need to differentiate those. We want this also, and this comes back to that first comment of these, the data should be itself a tool for learning. The data should be organized in a way that allows teachers to reflect on their performance and further their own understanding of fractional reasoning and the implementation of the curriculum, and then also to discuss results collaboratively and plan instructional responses. So the data needs to be quickly available and easily organized to have that collaborative work focus on this. This should be a social effort. And then lastly, we do want to measure impact. Evidence of growth in students' ability to demonstrate fractional reasoning over time is important, of course. So there's always questions when it comes to assessments. What about validity and reliability? Sure, we'd like to establish predictive validity eventually, right? That's down the road. Hopefully we will get that out of this. More importantly, it needs to be meaningful. And that's part of validity, of course, but it needs to be meaningful. But the intention of the field testing right now will not be to establish predictive validity. It will be to simply collect evidence of construct validity through the surveys that we hope that you'll participate in. That we will refine the tasks through this with feedback from the participants, right, to ensure that we're really honing in on those ideas and getting very well calibrated tasks, right? And then also to improve on documentation of the processes for improving the reliability. So improve the administration guide, the scoring guides, et cetera. So that's the intention of the field testing as it relates to validity and reliability. I've gone quickly. But I'm going to hop out actually, I wanted to hop out last slide, but I'm going to go ahead and hop out now. I just want to give a peek at where we're at with the assessment itself. So this is, I call this the grade 4 script. This is really the end of 3rd grade. I got the script twice. Oh, pardon me while I go into my Google Drive. I meant to bring this up, but then my computer crashed right before this thing.
While you're working on that,
yeah.
I'll just be asking a couple questions that have come up. One from Lauren at Aspen Elementary. Hi, Lauren. She has a question related to when you're advising teachers should be administering both the readiness assessments and then the diagnostic. So her question was to clarify, are you advising that teachers are administering the readiness assessment right before the instructional unit on fractions for that grade level, and then the diagnostic as a follow-up with those students needing further support, or what are your suggestions regarding that?
Yeah, you basically got it. I would think it would be most useful probably 3 or 4 or 5 weeks before that fraction unit starts, if you can. If the fraction unit is the first unit of the year, just go ahead and do it early in the fall, right, where it makes sense. But hopefully you'll have a few weeks before the fraction unit starts so that you can measure readiness and then respond to that, and then provide that proactive preventative instruction to ensure that your students get into that fraction work of the next grade level with the understandings behind them, ready to engage with the instructions. So that's the intent. Now, in terms of the diagnostic aspect of it, I think that there's a little bit of a gray shift there. I could imagine, as I'm going through trying to write instructional or scoring guides for these things, I could imagine that the diagnostic might even just follow directly with the screener. That is, let's say that I've got a student, I'm giving the test, and all they do is stare at the page. It's going to give us no information, right? So I might want to sit down soon after the assessment and say, hey, listen, maybe you didn't understand this question. Let's dig in here a little bit. Let's begin to understand if the student is able to even access the question, right? And so that's a piece of it there. And then there will be a full diagnostic then if you've got a student who really was not able to demonstrate what they know in a way that's going to be helpful for you, and you need to find starting points for instruction, then that diagnostic assessment would follow up with that. And when I talk about diagnostics, I'm really talking about understanding students in a deep way so that we can understand how to best teach them. This is not just simply putting them onto some kind of a percentile band or something like this. We're really talking about understanding students and their fractional reasoning. So great question. Thank you very much.
Awesome. One question kind of related to that too. We have Susan Yamin sharing that math recovery is amazing. I'm certified in math recovery and have taken the AVMR fractions course. Would this work be similar?
I'm going to say that it's well, we're talking about fractions, so there's only so much terrain, right? I would say that the fractions training that you've got is going to be super helpful for understanding the ideas here. It's a slightly different take on it, and so it's there will be some redundancy, I would say, but I think it's going to shed a new light on things. Is my hope, but this is not at this time we are not providing a whole professional development thing to go with this fractional reasoning assessment. Maybe at some point down the road, but really right now we're just providing you with a tool, so you use it as you want. If you find that this is something that's helpful for you, take it on. That would be my advice.
Thank you.
Yeah, so this is one that's intended to be like a fall of 4th grade or at the end of 3rd grade learning of fractions. So this is basically focused on, in general, the ideas of 3rd grade. There's a little bit of gray area there. Like I say, I kind of have been influenced by instructional trajectories, learning trajectories as well. And so some of those ideas are here, but there will be a dictation. Write the numbers in each of these boxes. These are going to be numbers like 1/2 and 3/8 or something like this. There's a whole script we can refer to. The next question here is a gray rectangle. In the space below, draw a rectangle that is 4/6 the size of the gray rectangle. So kind of a different twist on this, because this forces the child to disembed that fraction, taking it out of the gray rectangle. Seeing how they're going to analyze that might be interesting. A number line question. So you can see now that we're working across the facets of fractional reasoning. So we started with words and symbols here at the top to shapes. And now we're going down to number lines, similar in kind of the difficulty level here, but here's a number line that has the 0s, 1, and 2 already on it. Please put these numbers onto the number line: 2/3, 1/4, 3. And actually, in the script, I say, don't read these, just tell them, put those numbers on the number line. and then mark where each number where it belongs in, and put the mark by it. And so that's the number lines. Here we go to sets. That's the next area. I've got a circle, a small package of candies. I want to give 1/3 of the package, I should say, the package to my friend. How many candies do I want to give my friend? And they can circle those. I give a little bit more detailed instructions in the script itself, saying you can circle it, you can draw it, you can show it as a number. What is it that you want to give to your friend? Use the symbols to compare fractions, so pretty straightforward, and then draw explanations for your answers. And then this last one, a circle is divided into 3 equal parts. And so it's kind of a story problem here. One part is cut off and removed, but how much of the fraction remains? But I didn't want this to be a traditional story problem as such, because things get complicated with story problems. And so therefore, there is, and this will be with each of the assessments, there will be videos to support. So I'm really interested in developing these videos. There might be more of them over time, but here's just one example. Quick and easy. Show the video. Read also the problem, right? A circle is divided into 3 equal parts. One part is cut off and removed. How much of the circle remains? Write a fraction to draw to show your, write a fraction and draw to show your answer. So trying to create questions that have access to students that might not have the formal instruction yet even, right? So I could imagine, honestly, a student with almost no understanding of fractions drawing 2/3 of a circle, but not having a word for it and not having a symbol for it. So kind of trying to get that idea of what do these kids know and understand. I can also imagine on this one, and I haven't given this question yet, so I'm really looking forward to hearing your experiences, and I'm really looking forward to giving this question also to some students. I can absolutely picture students unable to draw a fraction that looks like 2/3 of a circle. Because sometimes that's very difficult for kids to visualize and then reproduce on a page. So knowing that there is going to be different kinds of behaviors that are going to come out of this, which is exactly what we want. We want more than just correct or incorrect answers, because we are trying to assess reasoning, not just the ability to get correct answers. Okay, so trying to wrap up here. There's going to be some pretty specific guidance for proctors, really looking for, that is teachers, those giving the assessment. I would like some look fors. Here's the thing, right? When a student is solving that first rectangle problem where they're drawing 4/5, if they just draw quickly a 4/5 down there at the bottom of the page, we're not going to get a lot of information out of there about their thinking. We might want to ask them, hey, could you show me some more details here? I might want to take that paper afterwards. If I didn't see the student do it, I might want to have that student come to me afterwards, explain your reasoning to me. So trying to get this as efficient as possible, but really trying to help teachers understand you're going to have to pay attention while your students are taking this test, because you're trying to evaluate how they're solving the problems. That's the thing. So it's going to be very engaged proctoring, checking, are the students starting on the thing? Are they showing their answer? You might want to say, how do you know that? Show me with a drawing or whatever, just to try to get more information from the students as we go, and to provide encouragement for students who feel stumped, right? So this is going to be a very engaged kind of proctoring process, is the way that I imagine it. All right, Tamara, any other questions?
Yes, you caught me off guard here. I was just responding to one that came into chat, but I have a question about the last task that you shared via video. So why did you pick a circle instead of a rectangle?
Because the circle shows the whole really, really clearly.
Thank you.
And I mean, honestly, it's like, yes, you need to be able to deal with rectangles. You need to be able to deal with circles, right? We want both. We got a rectangle problem already on the assessment. So this is a second assessment dealing with shape, right? And honestly, I wanted this one. It's computation is difficult. We've got a removal problem. And for our friend earlier who had the question about the 3rd grade standards, someone should call me out here that addition and subtraction of fractions is not in the third grade standards at all. So I'm trying to think, okay, what I do believe that this is aligned with the ideas in general of third grade and what a fraction should look like in third grade, and yet at the same time, it doesn't match directly with the standards.
Okay, so sharing that video, sharing the example of the assessment has gotten a lot of questions coming through chat.
Good.
Related to what you just shared about addition and subtraction of fractions. Do you have any multiplication and division of fractions?
There will be. There will be. I haven't, that's going to have to come up in the fifth grade one, right? So because we're dealing with multiplication, division of fractions, the question is how to get that into a screener question that gets us the information that we need about whether a student's actually reasoning multiplicatively with fractions and thinking about division. I mean, division of fractions is a difficult concept. So hopefully we want to try to keep that still to a one-page assessment. That's going to be a trick. Might spill over.
Two more questions here. So is I believe this is a question from Kim Buster. Her question is, this reasoning assessment given one-on-one or as a group? I believe she's referring to the readiness assessment. Is that given one-on-one or as a group?
So the idea for the one that I was just showing, that's this readiness assessment or a screener assessment, whatever you want to call it. That one, the intention is that you can give that whole group to try to make it as efficient as possible. The diagnostic is going to have to be one-on-one. There's no way to get the information without that. So trying to get the screener, the readiness information quickly from all the students, and then diagnostic, which is going to take more time.
Now we have a question going to the lens that you shared from Nancy Sokoloff. Where in the standards do you find fraction of a set? I know in fourth grade they do multiplying a fraction of a whole number, but I haven't seen fraction of a set in third grade.
Okay, so that's a good question. So multiplication of a fraction. So this is the question. Are you talking about 1/3 of 6, right? Which written symbolically, right? 1/3 times 6, right? Then that gives us, that gives us that 2, right? Or are we talking about 6 times 1/3, which sometimes implies to students this repetition of 1/3 6 times. The way that I read the standards, and I don't think that they are super clear about this, is that the first example there is a fourth grade example, and the second example is a fifth grade example. So once again, yeah, I have put a set problem into a third grade assessment here to see if they can find 1/3 of that group of 3. We'll see what comes out of this. But yeah, I think that those two are in two chunks. In fourth grade, where you're finding the part of a whole set, and then the repetition of fractions. Like if I took 2/3 and I have 4 2/3, then that giving me 8/3. That then is the fifth grade. At least that's the way I read it.
And then we have a couple questions, and I know that's your last slide here. So questions about how can I get these? When will I get these assessments?
Oh, yay. All right. So everyone who has signed up for this webinar here today, this presentation, will get an email that will be an invitation to you to sign up for the download. The download is going to be available next Monday. And so we will get you signed up at that point. When you get signed up, you're going to get your invitation also to participate. And we would really love to encourage you to participate, to join in the effort, because those who sign up will get, of course, full access to the assessment, and then also notification of any updates. Like I said, this is an idea. The idea is that we're going to do some iterations of this through the spring. Hopefully not too many, but maybe a few. And then you'll get invitations to provide feedback and directions about how to provide that feedback, either through surveys or other ways. Invitations to focus groups, which will be virtual. We're trying to build a community out of this thing, hoping through the focus groups and feedback that we might be able to collect some work samples as well, some kind of exemplary work samples, or some kind of, hey, what do you think is going on here type work samples that are curious. So hopefully that'll be there. And then any other further announcements about the project will be allowed in there. I should have put in here in the get involved thing, if you are a Forefront client, We will also include for you information about how to get yourself and your district set up for data collection if you are interested in that, because that's something that we would need to have our the customer success department turn on for you so that we can have that added to your curricula in the program and be ready for that data collection. So we would need to work with you on that. But I think that's everything that you need to know in order to be involved. Tamara, what did I
Awesome.
forget?
So another question, getting into adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing fractions.
Yeah.
So adding mixed numbers, subtracting, multiplying, dividing is not specifically called out in the standards. In your opinion, which grade level does that come up for?
5th. So 4th grade, you've got the that idea of multiplication of whole numbers times fractions. In 5th grade, you've got fractions times fraction. I think they might call out mixed numbers in there too. You might want to double check that. But that I believe is in 5th grade. And then 6th grade, you have division of fractions by fractions. So in 5th grade, you only have division of whole numbers by fractions or fractions divided by whole numbers. Either way there. But then in 6th grade is when you get the fractions divided by fractions. Cool. Any more quizzes on the standards?
No, I saw that we have West Allegheny on the team, so they want that added to their account. So again, for
Yay.
anyone that's using the software to collect data for your assessments systematically, just please feel free to reach out to our team and we'll add those to your account. A big thank you to everyone who's joined us today. Thank you for all of your questions. Just lots of sharing that this is useful, and thank you, but it's really us that is thanking you for joining this community and for providing your feedback to make these tools really useful for educators.
We're going to come out with a great assessment, and I really appreciate everyone's sticking around for this and learning with us, and we're looking forward to the continued learning. I really am very, very much looking forward to this spring and working with everyone who decides to join in here and meeting some new people and learning some new things. All right.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Let's turn off the recording. Thanks, Tamara. Thanks, everyone.